The cafe windows were washed in soft morning light, the kind that makes dust float like memories and turns ordinary tables into quiet stages. Owen Carter sat alone at one of those tables, hands folded around a cooling cup of coffee, the weight of expectation pressing harder than any rucksack he had carried during his years in uniform. He had shaved twice that morning, checked his watch more times than he wanted to admit, and chosen a seat where he could see the door without seeming desperate. The blind date was already 20 minutes late, and the chair across from him remained painfully empty. Owen told himself that he was used to waiting, that patience had been trained into him by long deployments and longer nights. But this waiting felt different. This waiting felt like hope slowly realizing it might have been foolish. Just as he was deciding whether to leave a polite note for the waitress and slip back into the quiet life he knew too well, for small shadows stretched across the floor toward his table, followed by the soft scuff of sneakers and the hesitant bravery of children who carried a message bigger than themselves. Before the story goes any further, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Dad Stories TV if you believe in kindness and second chances. Stories like this only travel as far as hearts are willing to carry them. Owen Carter was a single father and a veteran who had learned to move forward even when parts of him were still standing somewhere else. The war had ended years ago, but it had left its fingerprints on his days in subtle ways. He woke before sunrise without an alarm, scanned rooms automatically, and flinched at sudden sounds. Yet the hardest battle he fought was not with memories of sand and smoke. It was with the quiet of his small house after his son fell asleep. Owen's wife had passed away from an illness that moved faster than hope, leaving him with a toddler and a promise he had whispered into a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and endings. He promised he would be enough. Most days, he believed it. Some days, like this one, he wasn't so sure. The blind date had not been his idea. It had come from a well-meaning co-worker who insisted that loneliness should not be worn like a medal. Owen had resisted at first, saying he was busy, saying he had responsibilities, saying he was fine. Eventually, he had said yes because his son had asked why he never smiled at his phone the way other parents did, and because something inside him was tired of being strong in silence. The woman's name had been mentioned once, scribbled on a napkin with a time and a cafe address. No photo, no long messages, no expectations. Just coffee and daylight, a safe hour, a chance to practice being human again. As he waited, Owen noticed the small details he always noticed. The clink of cups, the murmur of conversations, the way a barista laughed too loudly to hide her tiredness. He thought about his son, Noah, who was spending the morning with a neighbor and would ask later if the date went well. Owen had rehearsed a neutral answer, one that would not bruise hope if things failed. He had also rehearsed an escape, a simple apology to the empty chair, a walk back to his truck, a reminder to himself that he had tried. That was when the children arrived at his table, 4 of them, lined up like a fragile parade of courage. They ranged in age from about 5 to 10, hair untamed, clothes clean but worn with the confidence of being loved. Their eyes were wide with a seriousness that did not belong to childhood. The oldest held a folded piece of paper with both hands, as if it were a fragile truce. The youngest clutched a small toy car, its paint chipped from too many adventures. Owen looked up, startled, and instinctively softened his expression the way he did for his son. He waited, unsure what role he was meant to play in this unexpected moment. The message they carried was delivered without quotation or performance, but with the weight of something rehearsed many times in their minds. Their mother, they explained in careful, respectful words, was running late and had sent them ahead because she didn't want him to think she had forgotten or changed her mind. The paper in the oldest child's hands confirmed it, written in hurried ink that apologized and asked for patience. The children stood there, breath held, as if the success of the entire morning rested on Owen's reaction. Something in Owen's chest loosened. He thanked them, told them it was okay, and invited them to sit at the table while they waited. The cafe seemed to pause around them, curiosity flickering from nearby patrons who sensed that something meaningful was unfolding. The children settled in, arranging themselves with polite care, their presence filling the empty space that had felt so loud just moments before. Owen ordered juices and pastries, moving with the gentle authority of a man who had packed countless lunches and learned that kindness could be practical. As they waited, Owen learned about the children without asking too much. He observed the way the second oldest automatically broke a pastry in half to share with the youngest, the way the third child hummed softly to herself, the way the oldest watched Owen with a protective caution that mirrored his own instincts. He felt a surprising sense of familiarity, a recognition that families came in many forms, often shaped by loss and perseverance. He did not yet know their story, but he felt its outline. Time moved differently at the table. The minutes no longer dragged. They softened. Owen found himself smiling, not the practiced smile he wore for coworkers, but the genuine one that reached his eyes. He told a simple story about his son and a failed attempt at teaching him to ride a bike, careful to keep it light, careful to stay present. The children listened, nodding, their laughter bubbling up in small, honest bursts. Around them, the café resumed its rhythm, but the table remained its own quiet island. When their mother finally arrived, the daylight had shifted slightly, brightening the edges of the room. She entered with urgency written into her posture, scanning faces until her eyes landed on the table where her children sat with a stranger who did not look like a stranger anymore. Relief washed over her features, followed by embarrassment and gratitude braided together. She approached, apologizing breathlessly, explaining a delay that involved a school phone call and a flat tire, the kind of morning that refused to cooperate. Owen stood to greet her, offering reassurance instead of judgment, aware that first impressions were often accidents. Her name was Mara Linwood, a nurse who worked early shifts and late nights, a mother who balanced compassion and exhaustion with practiced grace. As she gathered her children close, thanking Owen for his patience and kindness, something unspoken passed between them. It was recognition, not romance, not yet, but the deeper understanding of two people who had carried weight and learned to keep walking anyway. They decided to stay, to let the date continue in the only way it could now, with children at the table and life unapologetically present. They talked without urgency, letting conversation find its own pace. Owen spoke of service and coming home to a quieter war, careful not to dwell on details that did not need daylight. Mara spoke of hospital corridors and the ache of caring for strangers while worrying about her own. They shared stories of bedtime routines and the small victories that made hard days survivable. The children drifted in and out of attention, coloring on napkins, leaning against their mother, asking for refills. The cafe staff smiled knowingly, sensing that this was not a typical date but something more honest. Owen felt a shift inside himself, subtle but unmistakable. The fear that had accompanied him into the cafe began to loosen its grip. He realized that he was not being evaluated or measured against an ideal he could never meet. He was simply being seen, in a moment that included interruptions and noise in real life. For the first time since his wife's passing, he allowed himself to imagine a future that was not defined by absence. As the morning unfolded, Mara explained that she had hesitated to date, not because she didn't want companionship, but because she didn't want to fracture the small world she had built for her children. Sending them ahead had been a risk, a test of character more than punctuality. Owen understood this without needing it spelled out. He had protected his son in similar ways, building walls that kept danger out but also kept possibility at bay. Sitting there, surrounded by crumbs and sunlight, he wondered if maybe some walls were meant to have doors. When it was time to leave, there was no dramatic decision, no sweeping promise. There was simply an agreement to try again, to meet at a park next time, somewhere with space to run and room for children to be children. Owen walked out of the cafe feeling lighter, the day stretching ahead of him with unexpected warmth. He called a neighbor to say he would be a little late picking up his son, his voice carrying a note of cautious optimism that surprised even him. The weeks that followed were not perfect. Schedules clashed, memories resurfaced, and both Owen and Mara had moments where retreat seemed safer than progress. But they kept choosing honesty. They introduced their children slowly, with care and patience. Noah met the four siblings under a wide blue sky, and there were awkward silences followed by shared laughter, the universal language of kids finding common ground. Owen watched from a distance, his heart full and terrified in equal measure. Daytime became the backdrop of their story. Picnics under open skies, school pickups where hands waved from car windows, afternoons spent helping with homework at kitchen tables that grew louder and more alive. Owen learned that healing did not erase the past. It wove it into something stronger. He still woke early, still scanned rooms, but now there were mornings when the house echoed with footsteps and voices, reminders that life had expanded. Mara learned that accepting help did not make her weak. She watched Owen kneel to tie a shoelace, explain patience to a frustrated child, listen more than he spoke. She saw the veteran not as a man defined by what he had endured, but by what he offered now. Together, they navigated the delicate balance of honoring what had been lost while making space for what could be built. There were setbacks, an anniversary that hit Owen harder than expected, a hospital shift that left Mara drained and distant. They faced these moments in daylight, choosing conversation over silence, choosing to stay even when it was uncomfortable. The children noticed. They learned that adults could struggle and still show up, that families could grow without erasing where they began. One afternoon, months after the cafe, Owen found himself at the same table, this time with Noah beside him, sipping juice and watching the door. The memory of the empty chair flickered briefly, no longer sharp but instructive. He realized that waiting had not been wasted time. It had been preparation. When Mara and the children arrived, the cafe filled again with movement and light, and Owen felt the quiet certainty that some second chances arrived disguised as delays. If this story has touched your heart so far, if it has reminded you that kindness can change the course of a day or even a life, please take a moment to engage with this video. Your support helps stories like this reach others who might need them. As the day wore on, Owen reflected on how close he had come to leaving that first morning, to missing the moment when patience met purpose. He thought about all the times in life when empty chairs had convinced him to walk away, and how this time he had stayed. He understood now that courage was not always loud or heroic. Sometimes it was as simple as remaining seated, open, and willing to be surprised. The story did not end with a perfect bow. Life continued to demand effort, forgiveness, and resilience. But it also offered laughter, shared meals, and the quiet comfort of not being alone. Owen and Mara built something that respected the past without being trapped by it, something their children could grow within safely. Day by day, they chose each other, not as replacements for what had been lost, but as partners in what remained possible.